Looks like the stream is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I am Christiana Ellis,
I'm Mike Teen.
and tonight we are talking about episode 13 of Survivor Winners at War, season 40, the big uh, penultimate episode. Big, especially in the sense that it is literally 2 hours, and it did feel a little bit oddly formatted because it certainly had all of the material that you would expect for two single 1 hour episodes, but sort of stretched out and paced a little bit differently so that they had lots of extra time at the end to just recap things.
Yeah, which I think what it basically did is do the opening of the finale at the end of this episode,
Mm-hmm.
which I have to feel wasn't like a creative choice that they said, what would be really cool to tease the finale is let's put this weird promo at the end. It's that the finale has so much that they were like they wanted the 7 minutes for the finale.
Yeah,
And that's
maybe.
what I'm optimistic about.
Hopefully that's it. I'm a little bit worried that what we're going to get is just doubling it up. Like they're going to have sort of a different version of the same recap. Like not that
Oh,
it'll
like just
literally
like
copy it up again, but it'll like this one was like here's the recap of everything that happened in the season, and then what they'll have at the beginning of the next one is let's do like the individual narratives for each of the people in the finale.
right. And I guess I could see that because what they might have done is as people have probably migrated to this show, um, kind of midstream because it's one of the things that's actually still fairly new. Um, maybe they wanted to recap it and promo like, hey, you should stick. If you missed the first couple of episodes or whatever because you just came on as your other stuff started to run out, your other entertainment started to run out.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I haven't looked at the ratings, so I don't know if there's any data to back that up. But it could. I could see that being it, and them then saying, okay, well, let's make sure we recap it and really like promo this finale so that we get a huge audience for it. So I could see that too, but I'm still optimistic that they just wanted the time in this
Right.
one and they wanted it back, from the finale. So.
Well, I wonder if one thing that might lend itself to that a little bit is the fact that normally what they would do at the beginning of the finale is, like I said, like here's the sort of the overall narrative for this person, and then this person, and then this person had this experience, and like going like that, to recap everyone. But the thing is, right now, because we haven't had the Battle Back Challenge yet, until they do that, we don't have that person. So like, would they would they do that? You know what I mean? Is like, would
Right.
they until they have the challenge to do that? By the way, I just pulled up
Yeah, it
the
does look like they're getting a full rating point more right now than they have been, or a
uh,
full million more. Sorry, than was kind of their standard deviation.
yeah. Yeah, let's.
Starting
Yeah,
about
they've been averaging higher for sure since
starting about
like
6 weeks ago, eight
yeah.
weeks, 7 weeks ago. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, good call. It hadn't even occurred to me that that would be the case, but sure enough. So, but yeah, so we'll have to see how they do it. But I was kind of curious just early on. I was kind of just looking at the time codes as various things were happening, just to try to see if what we were getting is essentially two regular episodes back to back, and the answer was almost not quite.
Right.
Um, so uh, what? So we can still talk about the two sort of halves of the show, though, especially when it comes to things like favorite moment and biggest surprise and all of that sort of thing. So, what about the first half? Uh, would you say it was your favorite?
So this is going to seem kind of silly, but it just I I, it, I just so enjoyed the banter between Jeremy and Tony
Hmm.
in the beginning when they were arguing over whether they had 1 or 2 weeks left. Because they were talking about, well, there's 9 days. And Jeremy's like, yeah, so just over a week. Tony's like, no, it's closer to 2 weeks. So what are you talking about? He's like, well, there's 5 days in a work week, so it's 2 weeks. He's like, no, because we don't go home for the weekend, so there's 14 days in a week.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is work for me. It's 5 days, so 2 weeks left. And they just went back and forth for like 2 or 3 minutes. And neither of them really believed strongly in the conviction. It was more just they found just such a stupid thing to argue about that was so funny. I don't know, I just loved it.
What seems very clear to me is that Tony's wrong.
Yes.
You don't get to just define a week as whatever the hell you want it to be. And I think what really happened was that he kind of made a little bit of a syntax error in his head, but didn't want to admit it. And they're both in a mindset where they're going to be very petty about things. And so he just kept digging to try to justify why 9 days is closer to 2 weeks than it is to 1 week, when mathematically it's just not.
Right.
And
I don't know, but it felt lighthearted. Like, it didn't.
No, well,
Yeah.
like, neither of them were mad about it, but it's also just one of those things where they both recognize that they're having a dumb argument and it doesn't make any sense to get really worked up about it. But also, from our perspective, we can look and just say, no, Tony, that's not what a week means. It's, there is an actual definition of that, and whether or not you consider it work, it's exactly what Jeremy was saying, is like, but 7 days still transpires in the game.
Like,
5 days is a work week
your
only
family
if you're
for 2
not
days
still
this
doing
week.
it on the weekend. Yeah. Anyway, whatever. It was, but no, I agree that it was fun, but it was like, I definitely got the feeling that there was a little bit of that whole like cop versus fireman thing where like,
Yeah.
they just enjoy needling each other about that. Yeah. I was
Yeah, exactly. And so I just chose that because I wanted to pick something that was a little different than just like, hey, what was like the best moment? Because we can cover the highlights, what I think were like the important things from the strategic part of the episode. But that one was unique. I like that they left it in there. I like that it was fun, but it also shows the mindset, to your point, of like they're just in that weird space where that's the kind of thing that's gonna happen, is that people are going to argue and dig in about stupid things because they don't have, they could have plenty of time to like worry about stuff like that and arguing about that. Like, there's no reason to end the argument to go back to what? Just sitting around cat, like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just like that. Yeah, it was
Oop. Froze up on me a little bit there. Wow.
cool from,
There you go.
yeah. Sorry, just from the to show their mentality, to give them like a little personality, and that, also to show kind of the mindset of what people are doing out there. So I just enjoyed it. So
yeah, I think my favorite was actually tied into my realizing that for whatever reason, I found myself rooting against Ben. It's not like I feel like I dislike Ben or I think he's a bad player or anything, but I just find myself, anytime he is in opposition to anyone else, I'm just instinctively taking the other person's side. And I'm not sure why that is. I just sort of recognized it this time. And so in particular, this time when he decided he wanted to try to seed distrust between Michelle and Jeremy, which is not a bad play, but what I loved was that Michelle and Jeremy just immediately went to talk to each other about it and recognized exactly what he was doing.
yeah,
It's kind of like, so he told me this, and what did he tell you? He told you that? Oh, yeah, no, we know what he's doing. And I just liked that they just, his attempt to sow distrust just utterly failed, because it was much easier for them to believe that he would do that than that what he was saying was true.
right.
I liked that. And so obviously, it was not going great for Michelle and Jeremy. They were in trouble, and sure enough, like the big vote was, those two were by themselves. Everyone else was split between the two of them in order to try to account for, this advantage, right? And so it kind of just came down to it was going to be one of them or the other. It's a good thing that Michelle played the thing for herself. I mean, if it was otherwise, it would have been a tie between herself and Ben. But then there's more of them on the other side, so the revote still sends Michelle home, right?
Right.
So she didn't want Jeremy to go, but if she hadn't played her thing for herself and had it turn out successful, she almost certainly would have been the one to go.
Yep.
Yeah. So, what about your biggest surprise during that first section? Anything?
The biggest surprise was I have here I mean, it sounds silly, but the biggest surprise, and this is probably goes over both episodes, is that Tony has been available twice.
Yeah.
And that he's not even being discussed that we see.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that was probably it. But if you want to narrow it specifically to this path, and I don't know why I was surprised by this, but I was in how good Sarah actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that she turned what's just been a narrative of, well, as soon as Jeremy's available and we don't have these other things, like Ben needs to get him voted out. Like Ben just wants him voted out. Like he hates him. And she went and I think what Dalton Ross called it, like Jedi mind tricked him. And I mean, I think that's probably the accurate description. Like,
yeah,
she just sat down and talked to him, and all of a sudden he was on board with their plan. And he went to Tony and said, "Hey, here's what I think the plan should be." Even though Tony and Sarah, and Tony played it off pretty well, which again is why I'm amazed that people have not realized how good he is right now.
Right. Yeah.
He's like, "What? What do you think, man? What are you thinking?" After he, of course, knew the whole thing, but Sarah is the one that made that work. And I guess I just forgotten, because she has kind of that rough, blue collar thing. Like she is absolutely super smart at this game and really, really good at that subtle manipulation.
Yeah.
And may have been a two-time winner if Tony hadn't screwed her in the first one.
Well, I agree definitely. I think also though, as far as people not going after Tony, I feel like I don't want to say for the first time, but I had a little bit of a moment in this episode where I understood a little better this whole keeping a shield around approach. Like I've never not understood how the strategy was supposed to work, but I've always been skeptical about its actual value because it seems like a short-term solution, right? Because you end up in a position where you have now brought this person who you think can win to the end with you, right? But at the same time, there's definitely something to this idea of because everyone wants them out, no one will want to work with them. So they need someone to work with them in order to not go home. So if they work with me, then they're a vote for me to get out whoever else I want. And the flip side of that being, if I think that I am the next best after that person, the concern is if we can keep that everybody's attention on the number one, then even when we don't vote them out, they're still always thinking about, okay, well, eventually we've got to get out Tony. But if we take out Tony, then they all switch to saying, okay, well, who's the next person then? Versus the idea of saying, oh, okay, we all know we want to get out Tony, but here's why I think we should do something else this time. But then as soon as that other person's gone, we're still talking about Tony.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And so I guess I can see that, even though I'm still, what remains to be seen is, okay, but then when do you get out Tony? because otherwise you take him to the end, and I don't know how you persuade people that the obvious person who did so much stuff and managed to stick around all this time, even when everyone wanted him out. How do you then try to say, oh no, it was all my doing that kept this person around, and everyone's going to say, well, how is it not his doing that he got you to do that?
Go out of here.
Right? I mean, like,
Right. No, yeah.
Jeremy can say like, oh yeah, I kept Tony around as a shield, and then Tony's going to say, yeah, I got you to do that. And here I am. But
Right.
anyway. Yeah,
And
so,
I did all of these other things, and that's the thing I think they forget is like how not just all the things that Tony's done, but the fact that they're so visible, and they're so, and his personality and just sort of the bigness of it, like it's very easy to see what he's done,
yeah.
and honestly, I think like for Sarah to win, I think she needs to do to him what he did to her the first time they played together, and blindside him close to the end, and make it to the end still, and be able to walk through how she was doing all these manipulations, and that a lot of the stuff, like, yeah, he had some of these big like flashy moves, but a lot of the things that put him in a position to be able to do that was that's her case basically. Yeah,
She, there's a strong case to be made about their partnership, that he's the flashy upfront in the spotlight one, and she's the one making the plans actually work, right? Now, I mean, I don't think that's 100% true, but there's a truth in it, right? But the
yes,
problem, of course, is that she can be extremely effective at that, but then people still want the person in the spotlight to win. You
right.
know?
It will be much harder. It would be easier for her to make that case if he is on the jury.
Exactly. Like it's playing for number two, unless you can actually backstab them at some point and get them out.
Yep.
And run your coup. And it's not clear to me that like Sarah has like toyed with the idea a little bit, but doesn't really seem to have her heart in it.
Yeah, I mean that was the one thing that he like caught from the spy nest or whatever later in the episode was
Yeah.
I think she was talking to Denise about maybe they bring her instead of him, and but like you said, it seemed like just idle conversation, and
Well, yeah. And like all she has to say to Tony is like, when I'm not talking to you, I have to talk to other people, and I have to tell them what they want to hear.
right. And to be fair, like Tony didn't like flip on Sarah when that happened.
Right.
He wanted to move towards Denise and to take that out of her arsenal, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And she also could have said, Tony, I know where your spy nest is. Why would I actually talk about a real plan underneath your spy nest?
Which is a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the I think one of the other surprises from this early section is not a surprise in the sense that it was shocking that it happened, but just for Nick to be set up as this obvious target, like the whole mind trick of convincing Ben that taking out Nick is the plan, but then Nick wins immunity. And he doesn't even really understand fully how much he definitely needed it this time.
No, because if he had understood it, he might have made different choices later in the episode.
Right.
If he had realized that he was the target, and then by essentially just like again, but we'll get to that when we talk about the second part.
It's like the very beginning of the next one is Michelle just explaining like, okay, here's the problem. You just took all of our options away.
Yeah.
But yeah, good for him winning it when he needed it, and only downside of that, at least from Michelle's perspective, it was the wrong move, and so whether it was the right move from his perspective, it's definitely the wrong move from the perspective of what's good for the alliance of Nick and Michelle. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he couldn't stick around on his own, without needing to, you know.
Yeah,
But
his. I mean,
obviously, it didn't
basically
actually
his
work out that
both.
way. But
Yeah, his both sidedness like eventually like catches up to him.
yeah,
And this is the start of it and of course he wins the immunity, so that delayed it a little bit. But yeah,
yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, let's see. I loved just for other like highlights. Um, I was really interested in the discussion in tribal council of the psychological after effect of playing the game, where it's hard going back to real life and not still doing the thing where you are constantly second guessing the motives of everyone around you. Like the idea is you're supposed to be back amongst the people you can just trust, but you've trained your brain over an intense several week period to always question everything anybody says.
yeah.
And it's hard to undo even when you're back in your normal life. I thought that was interesting.
I thought so too, and again, like especially like apropos to like right now, it's that because that's going to be something all of us are going to face. Like, I mean, if they came out tomorrow and said, you know what, looks like everything's healthy, go back to regular life, it would be weird. Like there's an after effect to,
Mm-hmm.
Being cautious like for so long,
Yeah.
and so I thought it was again interesting in that how it translates over into like our actual society right now, but also I don't say cool to see, but interesting, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then the last that I thought was just fun is Michelle plays the 50-50 coin for herself and it comes up safe. And then she asks if he's like, can I keep that? No.
um, Another speaking of Michelle, another highlight I had was the fact that they kept going to this like weird like it seemed odd at first until I figured out what they were doing when they were working on the slide puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
They kept going to this like wide angle, and what I figured out was happening is that in the back you could see her still struggling to get that ball, to throw the ball up. So they're working on the puzzle in the foreground, and she's just like, oh, I can't get
yeah.
Oh.
It was hard watching her so upset in that challenge.
I guess at the end it kind of did get. She was pretty sad, but it was funny
mm-hmm.
in the moment when I
Yeah.
didn't realize like how sad she was going to be at the end. Like to see.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, it's like,
yeah.
We don't have to feel too bad for her. She was just really frustrated in the moment that she was just really having trouble with that one, and it was a bummer.
Yeah.
And yeah, but she also got to win the next one, so.
It's true. It just was funny. They found a camera angle where you could see. And that's why I kept figuring out, I was like, you really can't see what they're doing on the slide puzzles. Why do they keep going? Oh, I get it now. She's in the background. So anyway, go ahead.
But yeah, so I think that we talked a little bit about kind of the voting already, which was essentially it was everybody except Jeremy and Michelle were splitting their votes between Jeremy and Michelle, and and it ended up being Jeremy, so he was voted out. The whole who did it at the end and then bad move, like I don't want to begrudge him. I mean, it's shades of poor loser in there, but at the same time, I also I guess he just was really sure that he had people on his side, but at the same time, like, who did it? Well, like, who do you think? There's only a very small number of people left.
Right.
And essentially, if there were only 2 votes for Ben, like, the who did it is most of them. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, so what I think he failed to calculate was that he and Michelle were tied and that she just had the immunity. I think he just saw it as like they all came after him,
Yeah.
or flipped on him or something,
Well,
or
it
some
was
people did.
3 votes for Jeremy.
Right, so that's what he's saying. I think he didn't realize, that there, like, so he's trying to figure out who the 3 people were. But yeah,
Yeah,
it felt more loserish. I agree.
right. Yeah. So in any event, he gives his tokens to Michelle, and so then we are ready to like. So do we want to just say what went wrong for Jeremy?
I mean, Nick winning immunity
Yeah. Yeah.
and just having such a divide with Ben that he's been a target of Ben's for so long,
Mm-hmm.
that it just didn't,
Right.
eventually, yeah, he'd always been kept around as a shield, and he'd never ingratiated himself past that. So when it became time to not have the shield there anymore, he just something to do,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think that I think that he maybe, because of his personal antagonism with Ben, overestimated how much other people wanted to get Ben out. He
right,
wanted Ben out because Ben had it in for him for so long, and so it was easy for him to believe that other people also wanted Ben out.
yeah,
But you're right, though, that if Nick had won immunity, that might have been different. It just
yep.
goes to show that's how the game works sometimes. All right, so if we move into the next phase of the episode,
Yep.
we have Tony and Ben plotting to take out Nick and Michelle, which makes sense. Nick had been the target before until he won immunity. Michelle left over from the previous vote, and then that just sets up the whole argument with Michelle and Nick. And Michelle just saying, "Why would you do that?" Although, I mean, the thing is, if Nick had not voted for Jeremy and had instead voted for Ben, then Ben would have gone home. So Nick, in that sense, really did, like, he could have made it go the other way.
Which, yeah, is where we'll get to
Right.
biggest surprise on this half. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And what went wrong.
yeah. Well, yeah. So, and I think that, like, Nick is saying in this conversation he wants to take out Ben, and Michelle's pissed because she's saying, that's what we were trying to do. He would have been gone right now if you had not done what you did. But, at the same time, I mean, I think, Nick's perspective of that was, yeah, but I didn't feel like I could work with Jeremy either. And it's one thing to say the way the numbers line up don't work for us now, the way Michelle's point was, but if Nick is feeling like I can't trust Jeremy either, I feel like Jeremy's going to stab me in the back, which is fact. Like, he's right about that, right? I mean, like, that is what the original plan was until Nick won immunity. So, like, I mean, I guess Jeremy wasn't necessarily in on that plan, but I don't think he would have fought against it. But yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, it makes sense from Nick's perspective, this idea of, like, I don't feel like I can work with Jeremy. So and maybe Jeremy is a strong, candidate to win. So I want to take him out while I can. And I'm less worried about Ben. I mean, I guess you can follow that logic, but it's also the thinking about the final 3 instead of the next vote, which is almost the opposite of what mistakes people other times make. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes, you get trapped into only focusing on what happens next and not having any sort of an end game strategy, but you can also screw up the other way. But then, you know what? I was falling into old patterns there. I was just going to start recapping the whole thing.
I'm
So
just letting you roll.
yeah. What was your favorite moment of the second half?
So again, I like I told you, like on the first one, I tried to take the spirit of this a little differently this week,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of go with like a subtle but like amusing moment that I was just kind of made me spark a little joy for me. And it was the fact that we actually got the spy nest got used to actually listen
Pretty
to a
nice.
conversation.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it just after all the build up and the jokes we made about it, and it was fun to see him
Mm-hmm.
use it and overhear something and then try to like make something happen, even though nothing happened from it. Like just that moment was
Mm-hmm.
fun, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I think my favorite, just in terms of making me happy, was Michelle's little victory dance when she won
Mm,
immunity.
she did it twice, didn't she? Or she no, because she did it when she won the safe earlier in the episode.
Oh, okay. Well, it's when she won immunity that I.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was remembering her doing it twice, and I
Okay.
was gonna say she did it twice, but the other was in like the first half. So yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I mean, I'm not trying to like dispute that so much as to say it was the dance when she won immunity that I'm talking about.
Oh no,
Not
no, I'm
that
sorry.
she
I'm
might have.
just thinking out loud. I'm
Okay.
not
Yeah.
arguing with you. I was
Right.
thinking to myself out loud. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to clarify. If she did
Yeah.
the dance earlier, that's not what I mean.
Right.
That's
It
not the
was the
moment
dance
I'm thinking
after
about.
winning
Yeah.
immunity. Yeah.
Yes.
Her dance is fun.
Yes.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
it was just a nice moment, especially since she had been emotional on the previous time, and we knew she was in trouble,
Yep.
right? Because it really was looking like the writing was on the wall. It was going to be Nick or Michelle, right? You know, it's what it
Yep.
seemed like it was coming down to be. You know, because you had Tony and Ben both on that side, and you know, the only other thing that was really going to make any sense was if someone was going to try to take out, you know, Tony or Ben, right? But you know, what ended up happening was really almost like the decoy from Tony's side of taking out Denise this time ended up being what you know, Michelle and Nick voted for, because like even Tony didn't vote for Denise because it was really like, even though he maybe wants to target her, that's not what he did. So it was really almost of like the setup of like, you know, let Michelle and Nick think that that's who they could maybe help get out, when really everyone else is going to take out Nick.
Right.
Um, yeah. So what about surprise?
So it kind of goes along with what when you started just sort of introducing like what was happening in the episode. It's
Mm-hmm.
the biggest surprise for me was that after he had the damn opportunity to get rid of Ben last time, that he chose to put the disadvantage on Ben this time. Like it showed it surprised me, and I get where Nick's coming from,
Mm-hmm.
but it surprised me that he has like literally no grasp of like what's happening out there. Like
Mm.
it was him and Michelle. Like he should have put his rival and put her out, as opposed to take somebody that there was no groundswell of support to get rid of and try to give that guy a disadvantage in the challenge. Like, what does it matter? Like we saw, Ben was available. The disadvantage worked. He probably would have won it had he not had 30% more to do.
Yeah.
And so he became available based on Nick's choice, and it didn't even matter because nobody talked about getting rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
Like Nick just misfired on that so much, and it surprised me.
Yeah.
Because
I mean,
if he wanted Ben gone, he could have just voted for him last time.
yeah, I so often that's, I think, the issue with Nick, which is like yeah, a lot of his plans sort of make sense in isolation, but don't read the room.
Right.
You know, and so the idea of, yes, Ben is a threat. I agreed with that he was a threat last time, but I thought Jeremy was a bigger threat, so I took him out before. But now I think we need to go after Ben. But he didn't really like you said, and so he's thinking, well, I got to make sure Ben isn't immune. But you're right, he didn't actually have any sort of a follow through for that. He didn't even end up voting for Ben.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that you're right. I think in that sense, you know, I mean, like you could follow his logic, But certainly
100%.
looking back,
Yeah.
it was the wrong call. Now, I don't think he ever would have used it on Michelle, though, because
No, and my surprise, I guess, isn't that he used it on Michelle. I think it was just more the over encompassing thing of how bad he misfired in like all of that. Just that decision making that he made there just surprised me. Like you said, you can follow his logic, you get what he was doing, you understand why he wouldn't have picked Michelle, even though it was probably the better person. Is like just
he
ensure she doesn't win, so that she's the
well, but
target,
he
not
wanted
you.
like when she won, he said everything worked out perfectly. He
Right,
wasn't hoping she wouldn't win. He was glad she did.
right, and that's what I'm saying is the misfire is what surprised me. Like
Right.
he thought that because she won and Ben was so close that his decision to hurt, to disadvantage Ben is why Ben didn't win. But then, like you said, there was no follow through. Like he didn't go and then try to whip up votes against Ben,
Mm-hmm.
like, or we didn't see it. And it was just, it was
No,
such a
we saw
like
him. We
stepping
saw
on a
him push
rake
Tony
thing.
to take out Ben. There was a scene about that.
There was, yeah, okay, I guess, but not, yeah, you're right. I was thinking about it more, I guess, in the fact that there was no like really
You're right
groundswell
that
behind
yeah, he
it.
didn't really get anywhere with it. We see Tony kind of listening to a little bit when they were talking about how you don't want Ben to get to 4 because that's how he got to the end in his last season by winning that fire making challenge.
That's
So
right. Yeah, that's right.
you
There was
can't
that
count
scene.
on the idea of getting him out at 4. You have to get him out before that, or else he could win the fire making challenge. And like that was the rationale. And Tony seemed to be listening, but obviously in hindsight it was not. You know, yeah. But yeah. So I think, um, yeah, I think my biggest surprise was just recognizing how like we saw it build all over all of across the season, but just how much advantage in terms of tokens Natalie had over everybody else.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah.
I mean, because on the one hand, like she was quickest to get to the challenge this time because she had just been there on the island so much longer that when they said Throne of Stone, she says, "Oh, I know where that is." She can go straight to it. Um, Now, theoretically, anyone might have been able to do that, but it wasn't anyone else; it was her. Because she had not only the knowledge but the hustle to get out there quickly. But then to realize that first of all, it was kind of cool the idea that the idols that some of them bought before the last Battleback challenge still count. So if they win this time, they still get it. But the
Yep.
idea that she is going to have that idol and 3 advantages and still had enough extra tokens to buy a jar of peanut butter and a second idol for Tyson in case she wins, which was just like on the one hand you could say that's just like it's so generous, but on the other hand, like I'm not discounting that it's generous because like it is. But on the other hand, what else is she going to do with the tokens, right? Like if she has the maximum number of advantages she can get and she feels like she really can't get anything else that's useful for her with those tokens and they're just going to go to waste anyway. And only one person's going to win that challenge. So if she feels like if it's not going to be me, I would like it to be Tyson, then I want to help him and I've got the extra tokens to do it and it doesn't hurt me at all because the only way he would have an opportunity to use it is if I no longer have an opportunity.
Right.
Right? So, like, I'm not discounting that it's generous for her to do it, but also she's not really sacrificing anything.
No, she's not. And so yeah, I acknowledged this moment in a different part of our conversation, with the because I thought we would do which again we can do whatever
Oh,
we
were
want.
you thinking this was like a third phase of the?
No, I was thinking of like the MVP part,
Mm,
splitting
mm.
that between 2 halves also.
Oh, okay, yeah, I didn't even think about. I kind of missed that in our first segment. for
Which is
section
fine. I mean, I
7.
would have given it to Sarah in the first segment because
Yeah.
of her like stealth move that kind of, you know, so it was tied to my biggest surprise was forgetting how good she was, but then it was also it is what set up everything that made the whole rest of the next 2 hours like work. By her getting Ben off of the Jeremy thing, it got Nick in the spotlight, which then even though they went back to Jeremy, Nick became still in the spotlight come the next round. And
Yeah.
so like she's got this manipulation that just like it was good. But I was gonna give Natalie the MVP here, but not just for that move, but for essentially similar to like Yule when they first brought in the immunity idol, and there was some issues. Like it was a cool idea, but the mechanisms with how it worked weren't quite there yet,
Hmm.
and he kind of broke the system because he figured out the advantages.
Yeah.
She's done that with what they've done with the fire tokens and the edge of immunity and like all this stuff. Like they can't ever run it this way again because she essentially broke the system by being so good at what the system was.
Yeah.
A lesser, not everybody could have done like yes because she was there so long she built up all these advantages, but that's only because she was really good at being there.
Hmm.
And so she exposed all the weaknesses.
Yeah.
And so I give her an MVP for that.
Hmm. But then again, I mean, like when you say she broke the system, like what do you think they should have done differently? I think what it just is.
Well, I think what this is going to cause them to do is think about what they could have done differently, which
Oh.
they might not have done had someone not upended it with so much dominance. Like,
Yeah, I suppose they could have put in more like puzzles and stuff because but she kind of did good at those too. Like it wasn't really like the different sort of challenges they had there were not all those long endurance ones.
no, but I would think that there would be, you would flip it to, because I get so I think what the point of the long endurance ones were actually supposed to handicap the people who had been there the longest because they didn't have it because it's harder over there.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't be, but that's where she kind of broke it because it didn't matter that she's been there the longest and been in the hardest situation the longest. She still can win the endurance challenges where someone else might have broken down a little bit. So that's kind of their idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if they ever did this again, they would have to flip and basically disadvantage you for having been voted out earlier. And because right now, she's proved it so obvious. Like the people who made it the longest have the least chance to get back in, even though they played the game the longest and they lasted way longer than her. So I would see some sort of right siding of that, where if you get there near the end, either you true up to whatever the best person that's there has, so you equal them, and then you guys compete. So if you come in later and later, you have a better chance of if someone's been accumulating advantages, when you come in, you equal them. And then you and at least two of you are on equal footing at that point, and then you compete from there. And then the next person that comes in, whichever one of you got higher, they equal up to you, something like that. Where there's an advantage to having lasted longer on the other side.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what she kind of exposed, is that it's almost unfair. Like if you think back to Yule got voted out and then had to compete the next day to get back in and had literally nothing. No, he had no opportunity. He didn't have a chance to go get fire tokens to buy an advantage. He just had to go and compete.
Right, but the logic of it was that by not having had to be exposed to the harder conditions of Edge of Extinction, that he was fresher than everyone else.
Exactly, and that's why my term was that she broke the system, because it's not like they didn't think it through. That's all that logic existed. What she has done is shown that that it doesn't work like that. If you are strong enough and mentally tough enough, you can kind of break through that, because that was the whole thing, is that the disadvantage was supposed to be that she's been there the longest, but she turned that into her advantage, especially in this one, where she's like, oh, I know the island better than everybody, so I'm just going to go get last one.
But I feel like I don't know that it exposes any problem with the system. She just was that good. Right? They made it very difficult for her and she still excelled. Because being there on the island longest wouldn't have been enough if she didn't still have the gas in the tank to sprint her way over there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I don't think there was really, like, she didn't break the system. She just won at it. Well, and I mean, we'll have to see because obviously, the actual final challenge hasn't happened.
Yeah, but that's the same as like what Yule did. Like he just, it's. I guess I mean, like I said, expose the weaknesses in it. Is
Well, but I see. I'm not sure. I agree that there are weaknesses. I mean, the whole system, as we talked about right at the beginning of the season, there's definitely awkwardness about what Edge of Extinction does to the game, and some of that stuff, like how do you weight those various things, is different. But in this case, I feel like she didn't really have systemic advantages. She just, achieved. They set difficult tasks in front of her, and she accomplished them.
Yeah, and I guess I feel like I think we're closer in agreement than we think because, like you said, I don't think she has systemic advantages. That's why I call it breaking the system because she broke through what should have been systemic disadvantages and proved these. And I still think it was exposing weaknesses,
Well,
but that's okay.
yeah, I
I think
just
where we can agree is like where my point of her being the MVP for
yeah.
for us even having this conversation is because of how well she did.
Well, I just feel like breaking the system makes it sound like the system should have prevented her from being able to do as well as she has.
Yeah, so maybe I should have said breaking through the systemic disadvantages to expose the weaknesses is probably more of my, which I'm not saying you would still agree with that point, but it's probably closer to what my actual position is.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure I agree that they are weaknesses in the system.
And that's fine. We don't need to agree.
Yeah.
Because I think where we are in agreement is that we wouldn't be having the argument if she wasn't so good at what she was doing over there.
Right. Yeah.
So that's
and the thing is too, though, that it all could be moot because it might be that despite all of her stuff, that she still doesn't win. Right?
Also true. Yeah.
I would say that it seems to me that a bigger problem with the whole system is by putting so much weight on one challenge or two, depending, because there's the halfway point one and then this one, is it means that whatever that challenge does means that whoever is good at that kind of challenge, like it's like why Sandra decided to check out early, because she was looking at it and saying, there is no way that I'm going to be able to do and win that challenge. So despite this idea that we're dangling a chance to get back in, I don't have a realistic chance because I'm not good at that part of the game.
Right. Which, right, so you could see, like, to again show how good Natalie was, like, if Sandra had been first voted off, she would have lasted for a little while because she wouldn't have known what was happening over there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then she probably would have dropped out at some point when other people came over. It got hard and all that. And so she wouldn't have built a 33-day advantage of the knowledge of this spot that Natalie did. So again, I guess part of why I'm maybe leaning so hard into this is that there's, I think I read an article about how fans are going to be pissed if Natalie ends up winning. And it's like, I'm not rooting for someone to come back from extinction and win. Like, I get it. She was the first voted off. But, like, she did do some things that are kind of unprecedented that would make me I wouldn't be mad. I would.
Well, right. I mean, honestly, that article strikes me as the kind of sort of hot take journalism, you know what I mean? Now, that's not to say that there wouldn't be people who would react that way, because there's a lot of terrible people out there. But honestly, first of all, fans will be pissed if blank. I'm going to say the only way she wins is if the jury agrees that they think she deserves to win. Like,
so true.
What we discussed about this earlier was my feeling in general that I think most of the people on the jury would be biased against people who had been voted out and came back.
Yeah. The only way, I agree with you, the only thing that I think could change that opinion is if it really is as hard as they're trying to describe it over there, and they just give an incredible amount of respect to her for having been there for so long and turned it into her advantage as opposed to her disadvantage.
Right.
Like basically what we're just discussing. Like if they decide that that is worthy enough, then that's where you could see the difference. But I would tend to think alongside of what you're saying that the bias is going to be towards you shouldn't win if you were the first person everybody voted out. You know?
Yeah. Well, right. And so I think the only way she wins, or anyone who comes back in would win, is if they have persuaded the jury that they deserve it. In which case, I would guess that they would also persuade a lot of the audience, which I don't think will happen because I don't think they will persuade the jury. You know, like that's just my take on it. Is my prediction is that I think it would be very difficult, a very steep uphill battle for anyone in that position to try to win the money, if only because. And this is honestly a failing in the game design, a weakness in the game design of what does it mean for the game of Survivor if someone can win that way, right? It does kind of change what the game means, especially on an all-winners season, right? But I feel like the resistance against that outcome is built in because it's the jury that decides it, right? So they won't make that decision unless they feel like it is a significant enough accomplishment that it merits overturning that precedent.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, fair.
So on the one hand, I definitely agree. It's kind of an upset to Survivor precedent if you have someone who was voted out get to come back in and win.
Well, no, because that's happened once already.
Well, in an all-winner season, I guess. I don't know. I don't understand why people would be mad. I think that's stupid.
I agree. I was just saying that it got me. It incensed me. So it did what it was supposed to do.
So whatever. I don't know. So I don't know. I think my gut has just made me sort of irrationally mad at the principle of people being angry at Survivor because on the off chance that like Natalie succeeds in persuading a jury of her peers and fellow players that she deserves to win $2 million, and then that will make the fans mad. I want to just take any fan who's mad about that and just slap them because it's like,
fair enough.
What are you doing?
No, you made me feel better. You know?
Okay, good. I guess. All right, so I don't know. Where were we? Did we even have any segments still to talk about? Do we care? I'm not sure I do. We've talked about a lot of it. Did anything you really kind of want to talk more about before we?
No, I think we kind of covered through it. We covered all the highlights. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the only last, you mentioned Spy Nest 2 already. I kind of mentioned, but I'll just repeat because I liked it. Nick going into tribal council saying everything worked out perfectly. Well, not really, but yeah. And again, it's like Denise's only 2 votes were clearly, like even Tony, who in theory was the one driving the Denise target, didn't vote for Denise because that wasn't ever really the plan. Like maybe he does want to get her out, but not now.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think one last thing though before we finish up this one is that next time is the finale. So I think, we could ask the question, who do you think gets back in the game? But I mean, I think we both agree it seems like Natalie has a pretty good chance. It's not a guarantee. She's up against some strong competitors, but 3 advantages. I think the issue is we don't know how much of an advantage are each of those. How much do they accumulate having more than one?
Right. Yeah, it's hard to predict. I mean, she's lining up like she is going to be the one. But you can't ever count out Rob or Tyson, depending on what the challenge looks like and how the mechanisms work,
Right. Because, 3 advantages, but, if it still comes down to one of those puzzles where one of those challenges where there's just a really hard puzzle at the end, and it's one of those challenges where everything leading up to the puzzle takes 5 minutes, and then the puzzle takes 45 minutes. Like, how much is that really an advantage if she's not still the best at that kind of puzzle?
Right. So that could always throw a wrinkle in it. Yeah.
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 But certainly, I would say out of everyone there, I would still say I would guess that it would be her. Um, but that's where we come into, like, this is our last chance to predict a winner.
I mean, unless they get Tony, I, he's got to be my odds-on favorite right now. I think Sarah is probably my second, and honestly, if Natalie comes back, like, I'd put her third, like, in my odds. I could see a path where I agree with you that I don't think it's what's going to happen, but because of the dominance she had out there and how all of these people who are on the jury were witness and party to that, there is a path to make that case. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's the strongest one. I think a Tony or a Sarah has a much better case. But if she's in there, like, with somebody like Ben, who's kind of had like a, kind of had a strategy, but mostly it was like hang out with these guys and hate Jeremy, and then, Denise, yeah.
That's what I was going to say is that, I agree with kind of a lot of your assessment there, but I was going to go ahead and toss Denise in there just because she has done several things already that would look great on a Survivor resume. And, like, despite her name coming up there, it wasn't really like a serious threat, and she, like, I feel like she could be really persuasive at a final tribal.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd put her on equal footing with Natalie at third, And, yeah, I just don't see a way. Michelle's likable, liked by everybody, but I just don't see her.
I definitely think she has earned the credibility that, like, some people feel like she lacked from before.
Yes.
Like, she was one of those people that, like, people felt like she maybe wasn't deserving winner. I feel like, yeah, she's proven herself as a very good player. And, like, especially this time just contrasted against Nick, where she's having to explain to him, here's where you just cut us off at the knees. Like, we had options before and now we don't because of what you did.
Right. She's definitely smarter than people give her credit for. And I think what people underestimated in the first time around was her charisma amongst the other players and how that helped her win. I forget who she was up against, but it was somebody who was, like, not liked. And that was part of, like, why it happened is, like, they didn't want, like, it was like a Russell or somebody like that. I can't remember who, but
right. Let's see. I can find it. I'll look it up, but you talk about other stuff for a moment.
Yeah, because that's what I remember, at least, was that, like, she beat somebody who wasn't liked, and people were frustrated because it was like, oh, well, they played such a better game, but the reality is you can play a better game all the way up until the end. If you piss everybody off, and then you have somebody else who played a decent game, but is charismatic and friendly with everybody, then you can lose.
She won against Aubrey.
Oh, God. Now that's why. So, yeah, it must have been whatever the vote before that then, because I think that was part of the problem is that nobody liked the final two.
Well, so it was a final three. It was Ty and Aubrey and Michelle, and that was the season that she won.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Ty didn't get any votes, and I think it was because he had.
Yeah, he betrayed a bunch of people. He pissed them off, and they felt like he had, like, betrayed them and manipulated their trust, and, like, and that's where I think So it wasn't that he was disliked. The actions he took were so disliked, and that was part of the controversy.
Yeah. So at the final tribal council, Ty was criticized for his erratic gameplay and misplaying his advantages. Aubrey was praised for her transformation throughout the game. Michelle was reprimanded for coasting through the beginning of the game, but was praised for working her way back into the majority after being left out of Scott's elimination. Is the Wikipedia summary.
Yeah. Which
So
I think is what, again, what I sort of rediscovered in watching this is that, and what she earned back is that there is something to be said for lasting that long and having the charisma to have people genuinely leave with a good impression of you. You know, that can get you, and the way it's going to be hard in this season to win that way,
Mhm.
but she 100% built credibility.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah. I think she's a great player, and she is playing amongst other great players right now.
yep,
Yeah. So I feel like I agree with you. I think Tony's probably the favorite if he can make it to the end, but because of that, he will have a harder time making it to the end. So I feel like
yes,
if he gets to the end, he wins. But short of that, I feel like I want to give it to Denise.
mm, I like it.
Yeah,
Well, we will see in 4 days, 3 days.
yeah, yeah. I think with Sarah, like she's definitely a good player, but it's just like if she's with Tony, I think Tony beats her, and if she's not with Tony, the argument could be that well, she just did what Tony said, even if that's not true.
Yeah, fair.
But yeah, we'll see though. I think everybody left in the game is worthy of being there for sure. Like obviously they're all have won previous ones, but there wasn't anybody left now. I feel like I like Nick, but he was not playing at his best in this season, and so I feel like everyone left has been playing great.
Yep.
All right, all right. So next time finale of Survivor Winners at War. So take care of yourselves until then.